can have superpowers with this easy technique inside After Effects. Let me show you how. So we are starting with this footage of Yuval, my brother, which is giving this amazing performance of pushing the invisible force field. So let's make him less weird by first creating the wave's distortion source. All right, so I'll go to the beginning and create a new solid by pressing Command Y here on the Mac. I'll name it Wave and make sure it is set to the comp size. We are going to use the radio waves effect that you can find under the generate category to create the displacement source. Now, this effect, if I'm just going to preview it, will create expanding shapes and works like a particle system. We'll need to tweak some of its settings to make it work for this shot. So first we need to identify where we want to start the effect. In my case, I think over here at around 1 second and 19 frames. So I'll drag the solid to start over here, and then I'll place the producer point above Yuval's hand. Right, something like this should work. I'll first go to the stroke and change the profile to a Gaussian profile, which is going to create softness. Now, to see it a bit better, we'll change the start width to 80 and the end to 100. I'm also going to change the color to white, which is going to be very important for the displacement effect that we're going to use later. We can also modify the producer point just to make sure it is above Yuval's hand. And then let's control the timing. And by timing, I mean the frequency as well as the expansion and maybe also the speed of these waves. I'll start with the speed, the velocity. I'll change it to 100 so you can see that these are going to be pushed toward a specific point on screen. And I'm also going to change the frequency. Let's start with a value of 5 and set the expansion to a value of 20. And again, I'll preview to show you how this works. I think we need to keyframe those values. So I'll go to the beginning of the layer, create keyframes for the frequency and the expansion. And then I'm going to move, let's say, 2 seconds. So plus 200. And change the frequency to 0. So from this point onward, no new waves are going to be generated on screen. Now let's go back over here to around 1 second after the beginning state and change the expansion to a lower value of 10. I'll press U to see the keyframes and then mark key around those last two ones and press F9 to easy ease the animation. And I'll preview it. And to make things work a bit more faster, I'll switch the resolution to half. And this is going to preview everything much faster. It will help us to determine if the timing is correct. And I think that for the first wave, it is dead on. So I'll close the layer. I'll duplicate it to create the second wave for the second head. So I'll need to make sure that this one is starting over here. So in my case, around 2 seconds and 20 frames, let's just bring this layer to start at this point and click on the producer point and point it to be on top of Yuval's right hand. So something like this. Again, I'll preview it. Maybe you want to start it a bit sooner. And also I'm going to change the velocity. Let's make those waves run a little bit slower. So I will lower it to 50. For the last one, we need another version. So I'll duplicate again. And this one wants to start at around 7 seconds and 20 frames. So let's just start the layer over here and repeat basically the same steps. So I'm just going to place the producer point above Yuval's hand. Maybe a bit more higher. Let's see. Yes, this looks correct. And I'm going to expose the keyframes by pressing U. Let's start with a higher value for the frequency, so 7 in this case. And let's end with a higher version of the expansion. Now, the reason that I'm changing these values is because I want those waves to be gone by the end of this composition. So I will need to move the last frequency keyframe. So from this point onward, no new waves are going to be generated, and I will compensate by moving the expansion over here. And let's just verify that it works, maybe a bit more to the right. Okay, this was the difficult part of this tutorial. Now, what we need to do is select those 3 wave layers and pre-compose them. I'm going to name them waves, making sure to adjust the duration to the time span of the layers, and then I'll click OK. Next, I'll switch off the visibility for this distortion layer, select the layer that I want to create the displacement on, and then go to the effect menu, and from the simulation category, I'll add the caustics effect. Now, this is arguably the best displacement map effect in After Effects. It was designed by Brian Moffitt almost 30 years ago and still stands the test of time. Now, originally, it was created to render water, or to be more accurate, to simulate the way light is enveloped on a watery surface, known as the caustics phenomena. But we are just going to use 2 parts of this effect, the water and the lighting. So I'm going to close the sky and the bottom options and concentrate on the water surface. I'm going to tell it to use the waves as the watery surface and move my playhead so you can see how this works. Now, we don't need to see this blue tint of a swimming pool, I guess, or a sea, so I'll set the surface opacity to 0. And now we can just modify and design the way that the distortion is being created. First, I'll change the smoothing to a very high number, so 40 in this case, which is going to yield this result. And again, I just want to show you how nice it looks. I think this is a bit too much, so I'll change the wave height to 0.15 and the water depth, let's set it to a deeper water, so 0.3 in this case. And I'm going to go to the beginning of this simulation and preview it, and this looks just amazing. The only part that I don't really like is the way that this effect is dimming the footage. So we're going to color correct it in a moment, but I also want to introduce some light, or actually refractions of light, on top of those waves. So to do it, I'll open up the lighting section, and instead of using this distance source, I'll set it to use the first comp light. And this will allow me to go under the layer menu and create a new light. I'll use a point light. I'll set the intensity to a higher intensity. From experience, I know that at least 300% is going to work nice over here. And I'm also going to start the light where the simulation is starting. So let's say around 2 seconds. And this is because the caustics effect is actually going to render this point light on screen. So I'm going to actually zoom out and take it outside of the comp view. So this means the light is affecting those ripples, but we are not going to see it. So let's pause over here and open up the light settings, and under the light options, I'll click on the color chip and change it to a vivid pink color. And we can also animate this color. So let's go over here to the beginning, create a keyframe. You can already see how this works. And towards the end, I'm going to click and change the color to a very saturated blue. And this means that we'll have nice colorization for those ripples. All right, the last thing that I want to do is exaggerate the ripple distortion as well as color correct the entire thing. Let's start by exaggerating the displacement. For that, I'll go to the layer menu, and this time I'll create an adjustment layer. Under Effect, Distort, I'll apply the Optic Compensation effect. I'll reverse that less distortion. I'll go to where I think it needs to start. So I'm going to place the view center above Yuval's hand here. And then I think I'm also going to create keyframes here. So I'll create a keyframe for the field of view. And then I'll move over here, and I just want to show you what this does. If I'm going to change this value, you can see I'm creating basically some sort of a 3D tunnel just by distorting the edges of the frame. So let's go to a value of 60 here, press U so we can see the keyframes, and let's drag it somewhere over here. This is going to create this effect. Now, once he's leaving the scene, at around 7 seconds, I'm going to take out the distortion. So set it back to 0. And then when he returns over here, maybe I'll go to almost towards the end and then exaggerate the distortion again. But I also need to change the view center of the effect. So from this point, I'm going to create a keyframe for the view center and then move it by clicking on this target to this place. All right, let's see it from the beginning. And I think it really helps to sell the effect. I'm just going to find a clear spot because I also want to create some look and feel for this comp. Basically just add some color correction and glow effect. So for that, I'll create yet another adjustment layer. Let's start with the color correction. So I'll go to color correction and apply the Lumetri color effect. I'll open up the creative and I'm going to use one of the built-in lookup tables, which is this guy over here. And I'm also going to open up the basic correction and just compensate for the highlights, taking them to a lower value, so -50 in my case, as well as bring more contrast by changing the black to more or less the same value. So this is the before and after. I think I also want to create some glow. So let's go to the stylize category, add the glow effect. I'll change the glow threshold to 40, tap to the glow radius, set it to 100, and for the glow intensity, set it to, let's say, 0.3. So again, this is the before and after. Of course, I also prepared some sound effects ahead of time. I will enable them. I'll switch back to the auto, or actually to the full quality, maximize the frame, go to the beginning, and preview the result. And you must agree that this looks amazing and it was relatively easy to achieve. Now, just so you'll see that this is not a one-trick pony, here are two other examples using the same technique. So I'll go back to the project panel, I'll open up speaker pulse, maximize it so you can see this boombox example using exactly the same thing that I showed you before. Another example that I have for you is this fine lady that do this number. Works great for some sci-fi futuristic screen. So I want to encourage you to try this with your own footage and post your results as well as tag me so I can see what you made. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you again in another video.